No one deserves to die hanging upside down on a tree branch in the wilds of Montana like this. Blood rushed to her head, her vision a blazing red, her hands tightly bound and the eyes of vultures circling above, waiting. A former soldier who survived Kandahar now dangled helplessly, like discarded bait in the ancient forest. 6 hours without water, no escape, her heartbeat slowing like a countdown clock. Then the bushes rustled. Not human. A massive wolf emerged, nearly 140 pounds, its amber eyes coldly fixed on the defenseless figure. This should have been the end, but instead, something unimaginable happened. The wolf stepped closer, and with it came the secret of a metallic scar that could change everything. Was this predator her death sentence, or the key to survival? The Montana morning unfolded like a silver film, mist murmuring over the grasslands, and distant mountains bathed in pearly gray light. Evelyn Hart woke before dawn, cold sweat soaking her back despite the small wooden room's lack of heat. The old nightmare had swept through like a barrage of artillery fire explosions in Kandahar. Earth erupting like boiling water, comrades fading into black blurs. She sat up, pressing her palms to her eyelids, counting breaths until her chest stopped heaving. No alarms, no circling planes, just the sound of deer stepping through the forest edge and the sparkling creek behind the house. Her cabin, a modest pine structure perched on a slope overlooking Lamar Valley, was chosen not for beauty, but because it sat at the end of an unnamed dirt road. No mail arrived, cell signal flickered like stars in a rainy sky, and neighbors were distant enough that a cough could become a rumor. She needed distance. Needed emptiness, where the voices of the past could shatter and fade. Evelyn hung her dog tags on a hook by the door, just below a handwritten sign taped up, "Check the lock 3 times." Her fingers brushed the lock, testing it again and again, as if each turn added another layer of armor. On the table, sleeping pills stood in formation like soldiers awaiting orders, but she ignored them, pouring coffee from a smoky steel thermos instead. The steam curled up, its bitter scent gripping her throat, pulling her back to the present where the clank of metal was just a pan or a closing door. She'd tried finding work in the city. People read her resume, saw a combat trauma, and smiled politely, like a door softly shutting. Evelyn left the world of glass and steel, taking a temporary job, assisting with trail inventories for a small park management office. Not a ranger, no badge, just dirty boots and a notebook. But the forest didn't ask for credentials. The forest allowed footsteps, and sometimes it allowed silence. She slung a backpack onto the porch, adjusting the straps. Folding knife, first aid kit, water bottle, an old scratched camera, and a handheld radio tucked in her chest pocket. Not the useless kind from desert nights, but enough to call the station if needed. The sky cracked open with a thin orange streak, like a cut on glass. She stepped off the porch, wet grass clinging to her pants, leading her into a new day. The trail reminded her body of the march's rhythm, but gentler, a steady beat, like a heart finally at ease. On the packed earth, deer tracks ran parallel to fox skids. At a bend, a lightning-struck pine stood tall, its charred trunk like an abandoned flagpole. Evelyn paused, listening to the forest breathe. The scent of pine resin mixed with damp earth, the smell of summer stretching between rays of light. She tilted her head back, letting sunlight through the leaves fall on her face like coins, cold on her fingertips but warm somewhere deeper. In Afghanistan, she learned to read terrain like a stranger's face. Here the signs were softer but clear. A freshly broken branch, scraped bark, tufts of fur caught on thorns. She crouched, spotting a silver-gray strand on a willow twig. Long, thick, not from a rancher's shepherd dog. A pulse tightened in her throat, part thrill, part caution. At a shallow creek, she opened her bottle, sipping slowly, letting the cold wash away the metallic taste of her dreams. As she stood, a whisper of movement in the forest's edge froze her. Not a bear too low, not a deer too quiet. A gray shape emerged through the leaves, like a cloud touching earth. The wolf stepped from the pine shadows as if carved from the moon, and sat down here. Larger than any guidebook photo she'd seen. Its fur gleamed silver at the shoulders, a dark scar like old ink running across its cheek. Its amber eyes didn't raise fear but laid her bare, like a map unfolded. Evelyn stood still, lowering her shoulders, avoiding direct eye contact. Survival training said so. But the creature's calm felt more like discipline than instinct. A quiet order that made you want to stay silent. In a moment when light slipped through the leaves, she saw a faint glint near its left shoulder like sunlight catching metal and bouncing back. She blinked. The spark vanished, blending into the forest's breath. The wolf tilted its head, ears attuned, as if measuring the distance between them with a gauge beyond human. Evelyn remembered her hand, months ago, freeing an old steel trap. The animal caught in it didn't scream, just panted, sweat and fear mingling with the morning dew. She cut the wire, cleaned the wound with creek water, and walked away without looking back. She told herself some things didn't need reporting, like a silent vow between her and the forest. She wasn't sure if this wolf was that wolf. But the silence between two survivors felt the same. A breeze slithered through, carrying the scent of old snow from distant peaks. The wolf didn't growl. It only looked, then stepped back. Once, twice, its form melting into the willows like an unfinished sketch. When its steps faded, Evelyn exhaled, unsure if the tension leaving her body was fear or a form of reverence. She kept walking, but the forest felt shifted, its axis realigned. The signs around her weren't just ecological, they were fingerprints of a new mystery. Near the valley's edge, she found a strangely trampled patch. Men's boot prints, large and deep, tinged with the smell of gun oil. A .308 shell casing gleamed in the moss like a metal tooth. She picked it up, its weight pulling her hand like a heavy memory. Nearby, an old rope loop hung between two trees, camouflaged with dry leaves. A trap, classic, but effective. A chill crawled up her spine, not from the wind. Dusk was still hours away, but the light had turned greener, harder. Evelyn marked the spot in her notebook, snapping photos with her old camera. Low angles, wide shots, not details. She had no ranger's badge, but she had the eyes of someone who'd counted bullet holes in walls, measured time by seconds between blasts. This wasn't an amateur's game. It had intent. It had a schedule. Turning back, her radio crackled briefly, like someone tapping a metal box from far away. A signal flickered, then died. She stopped, listening, but heard only water and leaves. Evelyn touched her chest where her heart pounded, feeling an invisible line had just been crossed. Evening fell like a thin blanket, the mountains stained purple. She returned to the cabin, checked the lock 3 times, repositioned the sign, and spread the photos on the table. In one frame, the creek shimmered like a silver thread, and when zoomed in, something on the far bank glinted like a fallen star. Metal? A fragment? Or just a trick of the sun? She rubbed her eyes, closed the notebook. The forest outside promised nothing. It held secrets like it held mist. Night came with the smell of burning wood, and at the edge of sleep and memory, Evelyn heard a sound slide past the cabin's wooden walls. A long, cautious howl, like a warning from an ancient world to a newcomer. Her back stiffened, then softened. Somewhere, deep in the forest, the amber-eyed creature moved, carrying a scar that caught the light. And tomorrow, a call to check an illegal campsite would come over the radio, calm as a routine message. Except it wouldn't be harmless. Dear listeners, pause for a moment to hit that subscribe button before diving into the heart of the story, but only if you truly connect with what I'm sharing here. Drop a comment below to let me know where you're watching from and what time at island. It's fascinating to see people from all over joining us. The next morning, The radio on Evelyn's wooden table buzzed with a steady hum, as if waking up with her. A man's voice came through, calm to the point of chilling. Report of an illegal campsite near Specimen Ridge. Needs checking. Specimen Ridge. The name snapped her head up, her eyes sharpening. Rugged, remote terrain where casual hikers rarely ventured. 6 miles of winding trail, thick pine walls. Evelyn touched the worn edge of her map. Red marks like cuts. A perfect place to disappear. Confirmed, she replied, voice clipped, then switched off the radio. No greetings, no extra instructions. Pure protocol. But something in the silence after the signal made her shiver like in combat, when static preceded a trap's detonation. She shouldered her backpack, checking each item with military precision. Folding knife, handgun, camera, first aid kit, water. Her old combat boots kept time like the day she left Kandahar. The cabin door closed behind her like a blade severing the last safe world. The dirt road to the trailhead took 2 hours by truck. The pickup rattled, red dust rising in clouds that clung to the windshield. Outside, Montana stretched endlessly. Golden grasslands, gray-purple mountains, silver rivers glinting in deep ravines. In Afghanistan, the landscape was the enemy. Here, beauty could hide deadly traps. At the trailhead, Evelyn killed the engine. Silence rushed in, swallowing the motor's hum. She unfolded a paper map, cross-referencing marked coordinates. Specimen Ridge jutted like a rib from the mountain's body. Tough terrain, but exactly why smugglers and poachers loved it. The radio crackled. She tried calling back. Specimen Ridge. Ranger Hart, proceeding with check. Only static answered. The signal vanished behind the mountains, as if devoured. Evelyn clenched her jaw. She knew. This game cut comms, isolate, ambush. Old tactics never died, they just changed stages. The trail began through dense pines. Light pierced gaps like broken glass, casting hard streaks on the ground. Her steps fell in familiar rhythm. Left, right, breathe. Muscles recalled patrol tension, her eyes scanning constantly. Broken branches, footprints, anything out of place. The first 4 miles were calm, then a different darkness emerged. A rope trap stretched across the path, camouflaged with dry leaves. The steel cable was taut, waiting for an unlucky animal's ankle. Evelyn's heart pounded. This wasn't a campsite trace. This was a declaration. The poachers were back. She pulled out her old phone, snapping quick shots. Her fingers brushed the cable, cold and sticky with dried blood. A second trap appeared a few hundred meters later. The rope was stained red. The earth churned as if an animal had thrashed wildly to escape. Silver-gray fur scattered around. Evelyn gripped it, her hand trembling slightly. Too familiar. Ghost. She tried the radio again. Still silent. No signal, no response. Only her heartbeat hammering her ribs. In Afghanistan, a dead radio was the first sign of a trap. She wasn't alone here, but her company wasn't friendly. Near the ridge's end, she saw boot prints. Large, heavy, 3 men. They didn't bother hiding their path, arrogant, or baiting. Evelyn snapped photos quickly, but as she crouched, a sound broke from the bushes. Boots scraped dry leaves. A stranger's breath. In a second, battlefield memories slashed through rifle bolts clicking, sand crunching before bullets flew. Her body reacted faster than her mind. Hand sliding to her pistol, feet shifting stance. But too late. 3 figures burst from the forest like beasts lying in wait. Green camouflage blended with leaves, face masks, eyes gleaming with a hunter's calculation. A rifle aimed at her chest. "Welcome, soldier," the largest one rasped, grinning. "You wandered right into the nest." All right, dear audience, if you're watching and finding this story gripping, comment 1. Or, "I'm still here to keep listening." Evelyn stood frozen, her eyes scanning like radar. 3 men, each holding a position as if rehearsed. One left, one right, one blocking her front. Rifles cocked, fingers curled on triggers. She didn't need another heartbeat to know. This was worse than any Kandahar ambush. There she had teammates. Here, she was alone. The leader, broad-shouldered like a pine plank, smirked. "No rush, soldier. We just want to know what you're patrolling for." His voice dripped with mountain drawl, slow, but the gun barrel wasn't. Evelyn kept her voice steady. "You just broke 6 federal laws, not counting assaulting an officer. Lower your weapons, walk away, and maybe I'll forget your faces." Laughter erupted like rocks in an empty barrel. "See? That's the problem with people like you. Always digging into things you shouldn't know." A nod. The other 2 rushed in. Evelyn spun, dodging a rifle butt, slamming her elbow into the nearest man's gut. He doubled over, wheezing, but the second grabbed her shoulder, yanking her back. The world spun in a flash, and her head hit the ground. Pain searing through. A ringing filled her ears like mortars exploding nearby. She tried to crawl up, but a hand heavy as stone pinned her back. A raspy voice hissed in her ear. "Stubborn little brat. The boss said you were dangerous, and now I believe it." Each word stabbed her mind like a blade. Boss. This wasn't a random ambush. Someone knew her patrol route, her schedule. Someone set up the illegal campsite, call to lure her into this trap. Evelyn thrashed, but her arms were twisted back and locked. They dragged her, boots carving long furrows in the dirt. The forest opened to a massive gnarled tree, towering like elephant hide. Locals called it the hanging tree. Legend said it was used in frontier days to execute outlaws. One of the men swung out a rope, looping it around her ankles. Cold, rough, the cord tightened into her flesh like a constricting snake. Evelyn kicked hard, but a punch to her stomach stole her breath. "Nothing personal," the leader whispered, tightening the knot. "Just business. Wolves need to eat, and we don't need trouble from rangers or nosy ex-soldiers like you." They pulled hard. The world flipped. Evelyn saw their boots retreat, the ground above her head, the blue sky falling below. Blood surged to her skull, pounding in her ears. Her hands were tied behind her, lungs compressed by the pressure. The sun hammered down like a forge, 95 degrees, no shade. Sweat streamed, dripping backward into her eyes, stinging salt. Her vision edged red. Vultures, patient black shadows, circled above. They knew death when they smelled it, and her body was signaling surrender. Evelyn clenched her teeth. Memories flashed, teammates in sand bunkers, shouts of "contact left," the thick smell of gunpowder. They fell, but she survived. Survived to hang upside down on an ancient tree in Montana? This wasn't how a soldier should go. She tried regulating her breath. 1, 2, 3. Keep rhythm, keep conscious. But her body disobeyed. Pulse slowed, heartbeat stumbled. Her last thought before darkness crept in. Don't let them win. The bushes rustled. A small sound, but in the silence, it rang like a gunshot. Evelyn opened her eyes, vision blurry. 30 yards away, a silver-gray shape slid from the forest. Massive, muscles taut like steel, scars crisscrossing its muzzle. Amber eyes burned in the afternoon Sunday ghost. This should have been the end. The wolf would charge, finishing her as easy prey. But it stopped, raising its head, staring at the rope holding her. A strange stillness settled. At the edge of instinct and reason, something unimaginable was about to unfold. Evelyn hung upside down, consciousness flickering like a dying candle. Blood pounded in her head, her vision pulsing red, each heartbeat a hammer against her temples. She knew if no water in an hour, if no release in 2, her body would shut down. Yet even in her daze, those amber eyes cut through the fog in her mind. Ghost stood there, still as a living stone. Silver fur swayed in the breeze, scars on its muzzle catching the light. The wolf didn't growl, didn't charge, didn't retreat. Instead, it took a step closer, slow and deliberate. as if surveying an invisible battlefield. She wanted to believe it was a hallucination, her oxygen-starved brain conjuring a familiar shape to cling to hope. But then Ghost raised its head, standing on hind legs, placing its front paws on the oak, just below the rope's knot. Evelyn held her breath. The movement was like a soldier inspecting a prisoner's bindings. "Go away." Her voice cracked, hoarse as burning paper. "Don't waste your time on me." Ghost's ears twitched, as if it heard. Its golden eyes met hers, and for a moment, Evelyn saw the same look she'd once seen in her own reflection. The gaze of a survivor, scarred but unyielding. Memories hit like artillery shells. 3 months ago, in these mountains, she'd found a wolf caught in a trap. Steel cable bit into its leg, blood soaking the earth, fear mingling with the scent of rust. Protocol demanded she report it, but when those amber eyes locked onto hers, not pleading, just waiting, another instinct rose. She knelt, cut the wire with pliers, cleaned the wound with creek water, and left without a word. No report photo, no story told. A secret between her and the forest. Now, Ghost stood beneath her, not forgetting. The wolf tilted its head, studying the knot like an engineer reading blueprints. Then, suddenly, it opened its jaws, fangs gleaming in the afternoon Sunday. Evelyn's heart lurched. Was this an attack? Or, the first bite didn't touch her skin but clamped onto the rope. Jaws locked tight, force like a steel hammer, yet strangely precise. The rope vibrated, the jolt shooting into her bruised ankles. Pain tore through her, but with it came a fragile spark hope. Ghost threw its full weight into a pull. The rope stretched, fibers snapping apart. Evelyn stifled a scream, teeth gritted to stay conscious. 1 minute. 2. The world spun around her, but through the blood's roar, she heard another sound. The rope cracking. "Keep going," she whispered, unsure if she spoke to herself or the wolf. Ghost's jaws twitched, saliva mixed with earth and pine sap spraying. Its neck muscles bulged, the scar on its shoulder taut as if bleeding again. One more hard yank, and snap! The rope broke. Evelyn fell free. The drop was only 8 feet, but enough to ignite searing pain in her shoulder. Soldier's instinct made her roll aside, avoiding a direct hit. Gasping, stomach clenching, she felt pine needles and damp earth stick to her lips. Ghost stood beside her, not attacking, not vanishing. It planted its massive paws by her side, golden eyes tracking her every breath. Up close, Evelyn saw every detail. The scar where a bullet grazed its skull, the patchy silver fur where a trap once bit. Its battle scars, different species, same war. Evelyn tried to sit, but her ankle was numb, bruised black. Hands trembling, she propped herself up, body swaying. Ghost didn't back away. Instead, it stepped closer, lowering its shoulder, like a silver-gray wall inviting her to lean. "You," her voice rasped, "you don't know what you just did." But in those amber eyes, something told her it understood better than any human. From afar, an engine roared to life. ATVs. Evelyn snapped toward the sound. Her heart sank. They were coming back to check their bait, and now, with the rope cut, she had no cover except the wolf beside her. Ghost turned toward the forest, then back at her. Ears erect, body taut like a bowstring. Its stance spoke clearer than words. "Follow me. Trust me." Dear audience, are you still here? Take a moment to relax. Maybe grab a glass of water and keep listening to this gripping tale. Comment 1 if you find this story thrilling. Don't forget to hit subscribe. The Montana forest swallowed them. Evelyn limped, her swollen ankle throbbing like a bruised apple, each step cracking like breaking glass in her joints. Ghost moved ahead, its massive form eerily silent, each step light as mist. Occasionally it stopped, glancing back, amber eyes glinting. as if counting her remaining breaths. The ATV's roar grew closer. The hunters would soon find their prey gone. Evelyn tried to speed up, but her body betrayed her. Knees frozen, lungs burning. Her breaths grew loud, each step crunching dry leaves. She heard the difference. Ghost glided like a shadow, while she stumbled like a drum signaling her presence. "Damn it," she muttered, clutching her side, teeth gritted against the pain. Ghost paused, ears twitching. It tilted its head west, where the valley opened into an echoing void. Then, suddenly, it raised its muzzle. A howl erupted, long and resonant, piercing every fiber of the forest. Evelyn froze, her heart sinking. Suicide. It's giving away our position. But a second later, she understood. The sound shattered, multiplied, bouncing off the eastern cliffs, echoing back from the western valley. Not one howl, but a chorus of dozens, ringing through the forest like a primal opera. Ghost howled again, and this time, responses seemed to come from every direction. Evelyn looked around, chills rising. No pack existed, just one wolf. But with the terrain's acoustics, Ghost had become an invisible hunting pack. Far off, the ATVs screeched to a halt. Curses rang out, followed by erratic gunfire into the void. The hunters were panicking. They believed they were surrounded. "My God," Evelyn whispered, staring at Ghost. "You're fighting like a soldier." Ghost turned, its amber eyes glinting with something like amusement. Then it growled low, urging her onward. They veered off the trail, weaving through thorny brush like a trap of claws. Branches tore her jacket, scraping skin, but adrenaline dulled the pain. Ghost led through a path only animals knew, leaving no clear tracks. Half an hour later, the engine noise faded, then stopped. But Evelyn knew this wasn't the end. The poachers would regroup, bring more guns, more men. They stopped by a small stream. Crystal water flowed over pebbles, reflecting the slanting Sunday. Evelyn collapsed, splashing water on her face, her throat opening like a gate. Cold, but the sweetest she'd tasted since Afghanistan. Ghost lowered its muzzle beside her, drinking, its heavy breaths warming her hand. In that moment, soldier and wolf shared the same lifeline, the same pause. But peace didn't last. Evelyn spotted boot prints in the wet mud, so fresh the water hadn't filled them. The enemy was closer than she thought. "Ghost," she whispered, pointing to the ground. The wolf raised its head, the scent of gun oil hitting its nose. A deep growl rumbled, shaking the earth. Both moved instantly. Ghost bounded up the stream bank, glancing back. Not a question, but a command. "Follow me." She hobbled forward, every muscle protesting, but one thought burned. Stop, and it's over. They melted into the forest's shadows, her heartbeat blending with the lingering howls echoing through the mountains. Evelyn wasn't sure if she followed a wolf or marched with her last remaining comrade, but she knew. Ghost had turned the enemy's fear into a weapon, giving her one more day to live. A helicopter's rotors thrummed in the distance, pounding the forest like a storm's drum. Evelyn halted, instinctively dropping low, ears straining. Ghost stopped too, its pointed ears pricked, body taut as a bowstring. Both understood. This wasn't random. A helicopter now wasn't coincidence. Evelyn crawled to a gap in the canopy, her war-honed eyes scanning the sky. A gray chopper, no markings, no insignia. An anonymous iron bird. She swallowed hard. Civilian contractor. Armed mercenaries. The smell of Afghanistan surged back. The helicopter descended, pine dust swirling into a smoky column. A cable dropped. The first man slid down, not a roughneck hunter but a trained mercenary. His landing was clean, rifle sweeping a perfect arc. No need for a closer look. Evelyn knew. Ex-Special Forces. 1, 2, 3. The team fanned out, moving like they drilled it 100 times. No loud voices, just hand signals. She felt the cold professionalism. Find, block, eliminate. Her heart raced. She'd faced teams like this in Helmand, where every mistake cost blood. But this wasn't the Middle East. This was Montana. Who had the power to hire a unit like this? A fourth figure appeared. Evelyn looked, and her blood froze. Marcus Kane, the supervisor she'd trusted, the man who brought her coffee each morning, shared stories of his lost son. Now, he wore a tactical vest, rifle in hand, his face devoid of grief, only authority and madness. "Sweep the area," Marcus ordered, his voice sharp as a blade, each word once familiar, now a weapon. "She can't have gone far, and the wolf won't leave its territory," a mercenary asked. "Use infrared?" "No. This stays clean. No feds, no records. We handle it ourselves." Marcus's tone was final. Evelyn felt the ground crumble beneath her. It was all a trap. The fake campsite call, the jammed radio, even the patrol route he'd assigned, all to lead her to the hanging tree. Ghost stood beside her, breath steady, amber eyes locked on the encircling men. Evelyn pressed her hand into the damp earth, nails digging in. Rage, betrayal, and a rare fear tightened her chest. Marcus stepped closer, rifle raised, scanning the forest. His face darkened, eyes bloodshot with something deeper than greed. "That wolf," he hissed, voice choking. "It was there. It killed my son, Danny." Evelyn's jaw dropped. The pieces clicked. Danny, the boy rumored to have drowned. Marcus always called it an accident. Now, he blamed Ghost, turning grief into madness. "You're wrong," Evelyn whispered, voice trembling but firm. "That wolf didn't kill your son. It—" The rotor's roar drowned her out. Before she could say more, Marcus's eyes blazed like he'd seen a demon. "Shoot it!" The rifle aimed at Ghost. Evelyn felt time thicken like molasses. She had seconds. Her body ached, ankle torn, but the soldier in her wasn't dead. She couldn't let that bullet leave the barrel. Couldn't let Ghost, her only ally, fall like this. Her heart roared. Not again. No more comrades die in front of me. A deafening shot tore through the morning, echoing across Montana's ridges. Evelyn lunged from the bushes as the trigger snapped, feeling the bullet's heat and shockwave graze her ear. It missed Ghost, shredding bark behind her. A fragile moment, life and death, half a step apart. Ghost roared, a deep rumble shaking the ground. It lunged forward, fur bristling, but Evelyn threw out her arm. "No!" she shouted, voice raw. The beast stopped, its killing instinct restrained by their strange bond. Marcus's face twisted, his hand shaking as he reloaded. "You don't understand, Mitchell. That wolf stood by my boy's body. I saw it. It took Danny from me." Evelyn stepped forward, eyes blazing with fury. "No, Marcus, I saw." She pulled the battered waterproof camera from her torn jacket. Trembling fingers scrolled the screen, pulling up old photos. One appeared. Ghost caught in a steel trap, blood dripping from its leg, and behind it a small figure in a red swimsuit, waist deep in Willow Creek. "Danny." Evelyn held the camera high for Marcus to see. "July 15th, the day your boy died. Ghost didn't kill him, it was trying to pull him to shore." Marcus's face turned ashen. "No, it can't be. I saw it." Evelyn scrolled to another photo. Wide shot. Ghost gripping Danny's shirt in its jaws, dragging him toward the bank, fighting the current. "You were late, Marcus. Drunk, neglecting your son. When you arrived, you only saw a wolf guarding his body." A choked gasp escaped Marcus, half growl, half sob. His body shook as if struck by lightning. The mercenaries exchanged glances, their rifles lowering. Ghost stood still, its golden eyes locked on the man who'd blamed it for 3 years. In that gaze, no hatred, just raw truth. Marcus screamed, firing again, but the barrel dipped, the bullet burying into the ground, kicking up dust like false blood. A mercenary stepped forward, yanking the rifle away. Enough. This isn't a mission anymore. It's madness. Marcus collapsed, clutching his head, denials breaking into sobs. I killed it. I killed my son's savior. Evelyn approached Ghost, kneeling beside it. Her trembling hand touched its silver fur, feeling the strong heartbeat beneath. Alive. Still resilient. But relief lasted one heartbeat. Another shot rang out. Not from Marcus, but a mercenary at the circle's edge loyal to the blood contract. The bullet tore into Ghost. The wolf staggered, collapsing, crimson blood spreading over silver fur. Evelyn screamed, her heart shattering. She lunged at the shooter, her soldier's instinct taking over. Her elbow smashed his temple, her knee drove into his groin. He crumpled like a felled tree. She spun back. Ghost lay on the ground, amber eyes wide, searching for her. No pain, only forgiveness. No, not like this, Evelyn stammered, pressing her hands to the wound, blood seeping through her fingers. You saved me. You have to live. Ghost stirred, its muzzle brushing her arm as if comforting her. Then its eyes dimmed, the light retreating to a place beyond human reach. Evelyn looked up, trembling, the Montana sky spinning around her. One echo in her mind. No more comrades lost. Not again. A new rotor sound rose, steady and distinct from the mercenary's grim drone. Federal rhythm. Evelyn looked up through the brush, eyes wet, never leaving Ghost, motionless in her arms. Its silver fur stained red, its breaths nearly gone. Hold on, don't leave me, she whispered, voice choking like gravel. The federal helicopter landed, kicking up a storm of dust. FBI and armed rangers swarmed, securing the area. The mercenaries were restrained, Marcus cuffed, his face pale as a ghost. He didn't resist, only mumbled broken words. I killed it. I killed my son's savior. Evelyn didn't care. She knelt by Ghost, hands pressing the wound, hot blood burning her fingers. You pulled me from the tree. You tricked them with your howl. You can't fall here. A veterinarian arrived. Dr. James Whitehorse, silver hair wild in the rotor's wind. He knelt beside Evelyn, calloused hands checking for a pulse. A moment's silence, then his eyes darkened. No pulse. Evelyn felt a blow to her chest. She shook her head, tears spilling. No, try again. You have to save him. Whitehorse placed his stethoscope, searching patiently. Seconds passed, then he sighed. I'm sorry. The bullet pierced the chest. It shouldn't have survived this long. Evelyn collapsed, forehead resting on the blood-soaked fur. A choked sob mixed with a mournful howl tore from her throat, echoing through the forest. The rescue team paused, heads bowed, sensing the sacredness of the moment. Ghost had fallen like a warrior. 3 days later, Evelyn lay in a Yellowstone hospital recovery room, ankle bandaged, shoulder braced. News of the poaching ring and Marcus's betrayal shook the headlines. But she didn't care. The world had lost Ghost. A crack in her soul couldn't be mended. Then her phone rang. Dr. Whitehorse. His voice trembled, unlike his usual calm. Evelyn, you need to come to the vet clinic now. Ghost. Something inexplicable. She thought she'd misheard. But hours later, limping into the sterile white room, she saw Ghost on a steel table. Its fur was cleaned, the wound stitched, and on the monitor, small, fragile green waves, real. Its heart was beating. No way, Evelyn gasped, throat dry. Whitehorse nodded, his old eyes gleaming with disbelief. Its heart stopped for 6 hours. Body temperature dropped below survival. No brain signals. Yet last night, it came back. I've been in this field 37 years, never seen this. Evelyn approached, trembling hand on the warm fur. Warm. Ghost's ears twitched. Then its eyes slowly opened. Those amber eyes found her, blurred but filled with recognition. Welcome back. Evelyn whispered, voice breaking. A gentle touch, a massive paw rested on her arm. A silent handshake between two survivors from different battlefields. News spread like wildfire. Ghost wolf lives hit every outlet. Social media flooded with videos. Reporters and scientists flocking to Yellowstone. Some called it a miracle, others a biological anomaly. Religion, science, media all vied to claim the story. But Evelyn knew Ghost wasn't for display. It needed safety. And she found the answer in an old document. Dr. Henry Kane's will, Marcus's father, a wolf conservation advocate. He'd left a fund and land for a sanctuary, a refuge. Months later, Evelyn stood on 5,000 acres of Montana land, evening wind sweeping the grasslands. Beside her, Ghost, fully recovered, its silver fur gleaming, strode with regal power. Around them, other rescued wolves gathered, orphans, the injured, those freed from steel traps. We'll call it Ghost Sanctuary, Evelyn said, voice firm. Ghost raised its head, letting out a long howl, a hymn echoing through the mountains. In that moment, Evelyn felt something lost since Afghanistan, a purpose bigger than herself. Healing, not just for wolves, but for her own soul. The Montana sunset painted the sky pink and purple, stretching over Ghost Sanctuary. Evelyn stood silent in the grasslands, the wolves' howls like invisible threads stitching her torn heart. Ghost paced beside her, no longer a wandering shadow but a leader of a pack of survivors. Evelyn and Ghost's story didn't end with a scar or a bullet. It opened a truth. Sometimes, miracles aren't about defying death, but finding a reason to return. Ghost came back, not just to breathe, but to give Evelyn a mission. And in building this refuge, she realized healing others was the only way to heal herself. But one question lingered. Would the world media, politics, greedy hands let Ghost Sanctuary remain untouched? Or was a new, fiercer battle looming as humanity sought to claim this miracle for itself? Dear friends, this story reminds us that love and connection don't end in goodbyes. At 40, 55, or 68, we can all find a new chapter where challenges become purpose, where loss transforms into hope. Have you ever had a moment where helping someone helped you find meaning in life? Share it in the comments. Let your story light the way for others. And if you want to know what happens next with Evelyn, Ghost, and this sanctuary, hit like, subscribe, and leave a comment. Part 2 could start with your question.
Not here, old man. Go somewhere else. The gang leader's voice cut through the noise of the bustling gas station, while the townsfolk looked on with detached curiosity. Wally Hayes, once a Navy SEAL, now moving through life with a single leg, remained silent. His posture was steady, though his weathered hand quivered faintly with age, yet his gaze was unshaken. No one in that crowd could guess that within minutes, he would make one phone call capable of ending the motorcycle gang's reign of intimidation. This is more than a tale of bravery. It's about honor, a hidden past, and a man who chooses to rise against the cruelty of a silent society. The town of Everwood, Utah, had never been known for much. Its single main street stretched less than a mile, lined with two rival grocery stores locked in a decades-long standoff, and Morgan's gas station, a stubborn relic that had stood since the Nixon era. But if anything in Everwood could outlast the oil stain on the station's front concrete, it was Wally Hayes. Every morning at precisely 6:30, his weather-worn blue-gray pickup would pull into the forecourt. The driver's door opened slowly, as though even time allowed him a moment to steady himself before stepping out on his single leg. He moved with deliberate care, leaning on a polished wooden cane, head slightly bowed, as if asking the earth's leave before taking each step. On his head rested an old baseball cap, its color bleached by decades of sun, still stitched with a tiny Navy SEAL insignia so frayed it was barely visible. It never left his head, not even during his ritual donut, at Annie's diner next door. Wally Hayes, 88 years old, lost his leg in 1984 during a mission so classified it had never been declassified. A fixture in Everwood for 60 years. Somewhere along the way, people stopped calling him a regular and started calling him part of the scenery. Children didn't like him not because he was unpleasant, no one could recall hearing him raise his voice, but because he seemed like a black and white photograph dropped into their world of bright TikTok clips. To them, he was simply an old man who did nothing, said nothing, had no Facebook, and just sat each morning watching the sky and passers-by, as though waiting for something or someone from long ago to return. A group of local teens often hung around the station, calling him the Relic. One once joked, "We should put up a no parking sign for Cold War survivors." Another time, a boy tried yanking Wally's cane away while he fueled up just a stunt for a viral video, but Wally didn't flinch. He leaned slightly, tightened his grip on the cane, and fixed the boy with an unblinking, quiet intensity. The prank ended right there. No one ever figured out why. Still, Wally kept his habits. He sat beneath the pump awning on a worn wooden bench, coffee to his left, a half-eaten donut nearby, one the sparrows had learned to expect. When Sheriff Morgan once asked why he didn't move to a nursing home, Wally just smiled and said, "I'm not ready to live in a place where everyone's forgotten why they once mattered." Some folks thought he was odd. Others thought he was lonely. But the few old veterans in town understood. Sometimes silence is the only way to keep from forgetting what must never be forgotten. Everwood didn't dislike Wally Hayes, but neither did they truly see him. He was like an old journal wedged between stacks of unpaid bills, present but unopened. That changed on a Monday morning, before the frost had melted from windshields, when the deep roar of motorcycles rolled into Morgan's. The leader wore a leather jacket with a snake emblem and eyes that made friendliness impossible. Wally was at pump number 3. Minutes later, the name Wally Hayes would be on every tongue in Everwood. Not because he fought, not because he shouted, but because of a single phone call, one that would change how the town saw him forever. And the question that would linger was this: who did he call?
Welcome to Veteran Life Stories, where real sacrifice meets unforgettable storytelling. Subscribe and keep their courage alive.
The first to step toward Wally wasn't the loudmouth of the gang. In fact, he seemed uncertain, still half a stranger to the leather jackets and skull-inked bravado around him. But youth has a hunger for proving itself, and that morning, proof looked like an old man leaning on a wooden cane. His eyes landed on Wally's sun-faded cap, the Navy SEAL insignia barely holding its gold threads in the morning light. Without raising his voice, he smirked. "Where'd you pick that up, yard sale?" Laughter erupted from the others, not the kind born from wit, but the sort that only needs a target small enough to mock. Wally didn't answer at once. He gripped the cane's handle, then turned toward the boy, his gaze neither hostile nor avoiding. Instead, it carried the hollow calm of someone who's seen enough loss to know the deepest wounds aren't left by bullets, but by memory. When he finally spoke, his voice was steady, like reciting a fact he'd repeated more times than he cared to count. "I pulled more than 30 men out alive in Grenada, Somalia, and Iraq. But I get it. Hard to believe when you're looking at a man with one leg." The words didn't just reach their ears, they slipped past armor and lodged in something softer. For a few seconds, the noise died. Only Havoc, the gang's leader, remained still, arms crossed, sunglasses hiding his eyes. But he had heard, and in the smallest crease between his brows, there was a shift, maybe disbelief, maybe curiosity. Wally noticed it. Of course he did. A man who once read an enemy's intent from the way sand shifted under a boot could spot the tiniest fracture in someone's confidence. He said nothing more, just turned back toward his truck, his hand shaking as it always did. But Havoc's gaze lingered, following him like a shadow. Was this one-legged old man truly what he claimed, someone who'd run headlong into fire for the sake of others? Or was he playing at a role, hoping for pity? Wally didn't care. Truth doesn't need applause to survive. The missions in Mogadishu, the rescues in the Middle East, he'd never told those stories. Not because of pride, but because no one had ever asked. And over time, the questions stopped coming. All he carried home was that cap, and its badge kept not as a trophy, but as a quiet reminder that once he'd been more dangerous than fear itself. A gust of wind lifted Havoc's sleeve, revealing ink on his forearm. Fear. Forget everything and run. Perhaps he'd never met someone who could teach him what those words really meant when lead cut through the air. Wally turned, met Havoc's stare for the briefest heartbeat, enough to leave a mark, enough to stir a dangerous thought in Havoc's mind. What if the badge was real? If there's one thing bullies can't stand, it's silence. Not the silence of fear, but the kind that comes from a person who knows exactly how strong they are and feels no need to prove it. Wally didn't move. One hand clutched the gas pump, the other rested on his wooden cane. Havoc, the Shadow Cobras' leader, closed the gap between them with 2 deliberate steps. No shouting, no swinging fists. Just a slow lean forward, his gaze locking on the tiny emblem stitched into Wally's cap, an old Navy SEAL badge he'd always assumed was a cheap knockoff. "So," Havoc said evenly, "what'd you actually do besides collect souvenirs?" Wally didn't flinch. No argument, no defense. He simply looked up at Havoc with the measured calm of a man watching a rookie on his first day of SEAL training. Then, in a voice so low only Havoc could hear, he asked, "Do you have a son?" The question caught Havoc off guard. One eyebrow lifted. A dry, irritated chuckle escaped him. Wally didn't press. Instead, he reached into the pocket of his faded shirt and pulled out a phone, not a glossy smartphone, but an old buttoned model that looked like it belonged in another decade. He keyed in a short number, then held the small screen up for Havoc to see. The display showed a grainy photograph, a broad-shouldered man in full SEAL combat gear, rank insignia of a colonel, standing amid a formation on the sun-baked sands of Mogadishu. The name tape on his chest read, Morrison. Wally turned the phone so Havoc could see it clearly, and pressed call. The ringtone was soft, but in that dead quiet forecourt, it might as well have been an air raid siren. 2 rings. Then a deep, steady voice came through. "This is Jack Morrison." Wally didn't offer his name. Didn't exchange pleasantries. "Jack, I need you. One more time." That was all. Havoc, the man who moments earlier had meant to humiliate him, took a step back, not because of Morrison's voice, but because of the name. Jack Morrison was legend. In SEAL circles, he was the commander of rescues pulled off against impossible odds twice, nearly killed while extracting pinned-down teams in Somalia and Iraq. One of the most respected living officers in the force. And here he was, answering Wally Hayes not with pity, but with the tone reserved for a fellow warrior. Wally ended the call, stooped to pick up his cap knocked loose when Havoc had instinctively flinched and settled it back on his head. No one spoke. The breeze carried the sharp scent of gasoline mixed with something heavier, the smell of realization, the taste of embarrassment, the bitter odor of assumptions collapsing. A young biker behind Havoc muttered, barely above a whisper, "He really was in Mogadishu?" No answer came. But something in Havoc's eyes cracked, not his sunglasses, not the practiced chill of his face, but the hard shell of arrogance itself. All it had taken was an old phone, a photograph, and a name he never thought he'd hear in his lifetime. One call, one image, and the echo of a history half a world away. Could that be enough to dismantle a gang's prejudice in the quiet heart of Utah? Or was this only the beginning? The first sound that came down Everwood's main street was a low, rolling growl like thunder far off over the mountains. Not loud, not violent, but deep enough to make the soles of your boots hum. At first there was one vehicle, then 3, then 10. For a town whose biggest procession was the 4th of July parade, the sound was both familiar and strange, familiar to anyone who'd worn a uniform, foreign to those whose world fit inside a phone screen. 30 pickup trucks appeared, each one flying an American flag, each door painted, faded, and scratched with the seal trident. They moved in perfect formation, equal distance between them, straight down the avenue as if still in a military convoy. No horns, no flashing lights, just precision. When they stopped, the doors opened and men stepped out, not fresh-faced recruits, but veterans marked by time, some heavyset, some on canes, some peering through reading glasses. Yet in every step was the quiet weight of men who had once carried the lives of others in their hands. They said nothing. Instead, they formed a ring around the gas pumps at Morgan's closing ranks around Wally Hayes, still at pump 3, one hand resting on his wooden cane. It wasn't a wall meant to intimidate, but a presence so solid it made the jeers dry up and the laughter vanish. Even the shadow cobras stood frozen under the hot Sunday. Havoc's eyes swept the circle. He didn't bark or curse, but the easy confidence was gone. He muttered something about, "Just one old man, why bring the whole army for him?" But the air swallowed his words. From the middle row of trucks, a tall figure stepped forward, pulling off a helmet to reveal close-cropped silver hair and eyes that had stared through the thickest battlefield haze. Jack, Iron Jack Morrison, the same man Wally had called less than an hour earlier. Jack didn't walk straight to Havoc. He looked first to Wally and with the smallest of nods, gave a greeting understood only by those who had once trusted each other with their lives. Then he faced the bikers. No orders, no badge, no weapon. Yet he stood in the sun with a stillness that commanded more than any shouted threat. And he spoke just one line, quiet but weighted like steel. "He once saved my life on the battlefield. Without him, I wouldn't be standing here." No one moved. No one laughed. The silence pressed down like a held breath, locking the moment in place, a collision between two generations. One that had given its youth for freedom, the other yet to learn how freedom is kept. A younger Cobra finally whispered, "Was he really in Somalia?" No one answered. They didn't need to. The 30 men, standing shoulder to shoulder, were the answer. Wally stayed where he was. He didn't need to speak. The circle spoke for him. They hadn't come to humiliate anyone. They had come to remind this town that some men, even if forgotten, are still owed respect by those who remember what honor costs. A sparrow landed atop the gas pump, head cocked as if to take in the sight, then darted away. It couldn't understand, but somehow it knew the silence should remain unbroken. And still, the most powerful moment hadn't yet happened. Wally had not yet done the one thing that would bring the entire town to tears. None of the SEAL veterans moved. No hand signals. No fists raised. Yet the air around Morgan's gas station felt altered thicker, as if the dust motes themselves had paused to listen. Inside that quiet ring of men long past their prime was a weight a Havoc so used to owning every space through intimidation couldn't dismiss with a smirk or a taunt. Wally began to walk toward him. A light breeze stirred the neatly combed sweep of white hair he'd arranged that morning. He moved on one leg in a cane, each step landing not with the clank of metal, but with the muted sound of the past stepping into the present, unhurried, unannounced, yet impossible to ignore. He didn't stop at arm's length. He closed the distance until he stood right before Havoc, placing a thin but steady hand on the biker's shoulder. No accusations, no raised voice, just a quiet truth, spoken as if from the memory of another lifetime. You think you're strong, but try calling someone who stood with you at death's door and hear them call you the one who brought them back. That's real strength. No laughter followed. Havoc didn't answer, just stared down at the phone in his pocket as if it had suddenly grown too heavy to carry. One of the younger bikers, uneasy but curious, handed his phone to Havoc. He hesitated, then tapped the screen like someone opening a long-locked door, wanting to know, but bracing for what he might find. The call connected. On the other end, a crisp, professional male voice came through, steady, with the cadence of an officer who had once commanded lives under fire. "SEAL Command Center, direct line. Your identification?" Havoc began to end the call, but Wally's hand, gentle and unhurried, took the phone, not snatching, just claiming it. His voice was clear. "This is Wally Hayes, Petty Officer, Alpha Team Support. Call sign, Blue Guardian, Mogadishu, 1984. A pause. Then the coordinator's tone changed, no pleasantries, no doubt. "Blue Guardian, stand by." The moment stretched, heavy enough to press on Havoc's chest. Then another voice came on, older, certain, speaking with the immediacy of someone seeing a name from his own history come alive. "Wally Hayes? The man who pulled Morrison out of the kill zone in Somalia? The one who used his iron cane to carve a path through the fire? Is he really standing there?" Wally only smiled. A young cobra, silent until now, muttered under his breath. "He fought through Mogadishu's storm, and I thought I was tough?" Havoc finally lifted his gaze. Standing before him wasn't just an old man, or a cap with a faded badge, or a story hard to believe. It was a wall of men who had left footprints in hostile soil, whose scars carried stories, whose eyes had looked into death and walked back. Wally stepped away. No one noticed that his hand had left Havoc's shoulder, because the touch had already left its mark. Not everyone gets to touch honor. Minutes later, the SEAL veterans moved back to their trucks. No speeches, no threats. They hadn't come to humiliate anyone, only to remind the town that some truths cannot be shouted or enforced by fists. Havoc looked at his men. Their postures had changed. No more posturing, no more swagger. A few stepped back. Others lowered their heads, not from fear, but from a lesson learned in silence. Wally returned to his truck, cane in hand. But now his stance was different. Less like an old man, more like a man who had once stood between his brothers and death, and today had stood between ignorance and a forgotten honor. Have you ever met someone who needed no proof of their worth, yet left you searching for the words to apologize? The midday sun tilted over Everwood's low rooftops as a patrol car rolled in from the west. Its door opened not to reveal the young deputies the town was used to seeing on Mondays, but Sheriff Morgan Roberts himself. In another life, he'd flown medevac helicopters for U.S. Special Forces in Lebanon, 1983. His silver hair was clipped close, the mark of a lifetime's discipline. His stride was measured but unshakable, the gait of a man who'd watched much fall apart and learned what truly endures. He carried no weapon, only a small notebook and a weathered wooden pen. Without hesitation, he walked into the ring of retired SEALs, his eyes fixed on Wally Hayes, a comrade he'd never met in person, but whose name had crackled across a radio line decades earlier. A name spoken with respect in the stories of other warriors. As he passed Havoc, the Shadow Cobra's leader, Morgan placed a steady hand on his shoulder. His voice was low, almost conversational. "I once saw a SEAL pull his friend from a burning helicopter in Lebanon. I've never forgotten it. And I know these men here, they didn't come to intimidate. They came to remind us of what keeps us human." Havoc gave a small nod. His swagger was gone. His crew turned their bikes without a word. No revving engines, no parting shots, just the quiet retreat of men who'd realized they were wrong. Morgan stepped forward, raising his hand to the crowd that had begun to gather. "From today on, this station is a protected civilian refuge. No one has the right to humiliate those who once defended this country." The townspeople lingered at the edges, hesitant. Then sweet Clara, the bakery owner, pressed a hand to her heart and gave a soft nod. She began to clap, not loudly, but with sincerity. The sound spread slowly, each clap less about celebration than about apology and gratitude. "We forgot you, but you never forgot us." Wally didn't return the applause. He simply bowed his head and started toward his truck. As he passed Havoc, he placed a light hand on the younger man's shoulder, not forceful, not lingering, yet somehow enough to make Havoc turn. It was the kind of touch that felt like the absence of something you didn't know you valued. A touch instead of a punch. A soldier instead of a score settler. Eyes that had seen war, now carrying the quiet weight of loyalty. At the back, Nick, the youngest Cobra, stood frozen. Dust clung to his face, his gaze caught between two worlds, one where strength meant intimidation, and the other, newly revealed, where a single moment of silence could make an entire gang stand down. He bowed his head and murmured, almost to himself, "I thought we were strong. Today, I realized we didn't even know what strength was." A boy, Clara's son, darted up and pressed a cold soda can into Wally's hand. He said nothing, just smiled before running off. Gratitude passed from one generation to the next, without needing the details of Mogadishu or Lebanon, only the knowledge of who had kept him free to grow up in peace. Before leaving, Wally set his faded seal cap on the weather-worn sign above the pumps. The letters spelling Morgan's were nearly gone, but now the sign bore something greater than a name, a reminder. This time, the cap was not proof against doubt. It was a symbol of loyalty that didn't need a microphone to echo far. There are people who don't need a uniform to remind us of honor. Acts that need no applause but leave a deeper mark than any medal. Wally Hayes hadn't come to prove himself. He'd simply stood his ground, and in doing so, compelled an entire town to reconsider how they treat those who sacrificed for them. In an age when real voices are drowned in endless noise, sometimes all it takes is a glance, a hand on the shoulder, or a faded cap to stir something in millions of hearts. Wally's story isn't just about a veteran, it's about dignity restored, compassion remembered, and the collective memory we cannot afford to lose. If this story has touched you, tell us in the comments. Who is the Wally Hayes in your life? And if you believe America needs more stories like this, like, share, and subscribe. More are coming.